Third meeting of the first day of this BigBlueButton World Conference. We are really excited to have you and have all these presentations, the lineup of presentations. If you haven't signed up for the next ones for tomorrow and the third day, well, we have plenty of content today. Today is a special day to me, and it brings me great pleasure to introduce to you to Shamiso Jaravaza. She is one of the people who works with me. Well, I have had the opportunity to work with her all this over a couple of years. And Chamiso is a software developer at Blindside Networks and has been part of the team since February 2022. She has worked on BigBlueButton integration with Moodle Learning Management System and continues to maintain the BigBlueButton plugin, which is part of the Moodle core. Miso is passionate about developing software solutions that makes a positive impact and the community. That was precisely what brought her to us. I should add that she is the leading developer of the integrations with Moodle, which not only covers the BigBlueButton VM plugin, but several other components that we have. No further ado, Shamiso, you can take it away.
All right. Thanks, Jesus. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I will be talking about the BigBlueButton Moodle integration update. So I'm going to break down briefly BigBlueButton plugins development through the years up to this point, how it works now, including the changes and improvements as of Moodle 4.4, and the plans we have for the future of this integration. So, as Jesus has already introduced me, not much to add here. Again, my name is Shamiso Jaravaza, software developer of Blindside Networks, and I've been with the team since February of 2022. So, I do work on the integration of BigBlueButton within Moodle. And just to reiterate, my passion is developing software solutions that make a positive impact on the community. So the best place to start the BigBlueButton plugin's history is with the beginning of BigBlueButton itself. So Blindside Networks started the BigBlueButton project in 2007, and in the last 2.5 years, we've hosted over 30 million minutes of virtual classes for more than 1 million educators. BigBlueButton itself is an open source virtual classroom built for helping teachers to teach and learners to learn. BigBlueButton is integrated within several learning management system platforms and is available as a plugin for others. In this slide are a couple of platforms and tools you may be already familiar with, or at least have heard of. And of course, Moodle is one of these platforms, and one which BigBlueButton is very deeply integrated into. In terms of our compatibility with Moodle, we have BigBlueButton plugin versions for Moodle releases as far back as Moodle version 1.9. Development-wise, you can see from this graph that we put a lot of time into building the plugin, especially in the years of 2015, 2017, and 2018, and again in 2021. All of this hard work resulted in BigBlueButton becoming part of Moodle Core as of 4.0. What this means is that from this point onwards, the plugin comes pre-installed on your Moodle site, same way any other course activities would, such as forums, quizzes, and assignments. So for us, this was a huge milestone. Moving on to the overview of the integration, as mentioned before, we have full integration within Moodle Core as a course activity. We have features such as scheduled sessions appearing in the calendar and activity statistics. Currently, the plugin supports guest access to meetings for users without accounts. So what this means is that anybody with a Moodle user account can receive a link provided by a teacher to join a session. The plugin also handles management of recordings that are created during meetings. So for example, teachers can import recordings from other BigBlueButton activities, including from other courses, which might be useful for students to have a list of specific recordings all in one place. And speaking of students, In Moodle, an activity is considered to be completed when a student performs certain tasks. So how a student participates in a BigBlueButton meeting can be used to determine activity completion. This custom completion for the plugin includes chats, how long a student has been in a meeting for, and polls, among other criteria. So here I've included how a BigBlueButton activity appears within Moodle. As you can see, there's the activity page, which contains the information about the session, including the activity name. Here, the activity name is my session, and the status of the room. And by status of the room, that means whether at that particular moment in time, the session can be joined or not, as well as the start and the end times of the session. So sessions can be scheduled with specific start and end times so that outside of these times, the session can't be joined by students. Also, it may be difficult to see from this picture, it's a bit small, but there is a green box with a check mark to indicate that the user has met the activity completion criteria. So students will always know what is required of them and what is left to do. To the right in the picture, teachers can add guest users to the session by clicking the Add Guests button. This would send an invitation to the guest via email, and that email would contain a link to join the session. And beside that is the Join Session button. So below all of this information is the list of recordings where instructors can actually manage recordings and students can view recordings from this same list. Now, moving on to the improvements and new features as of Moodle 4.4. Each new release, we aim to build upon the plugin to enhance its functionality and the user experience. So here's a list of the additions we made to the plugin. Some are visible, some are not quite so visible, such as the bug fixes, but I'm going to be focusing on explaining the more significant changes in this release. To start, we have here require registration for BigBlueButton plugin server credentials. This is a change to how the plugin can be set up. We've introduced the option to register for server credentials that can be used by the plugin. A bit of an explanation as to what this change means is that up until this point, the BigBlueButton plugin used test server credentials by default for every fresh installation of Moodle. For those of you who are using Moodle 4.4, you might already be aware that the use of these default server credentials will soon be phased out. As an alternative, Blindside Networks is providing access to free tier service through registration. So you can register with Blindside Networks and receive your own private server credentials that can be used in the BigBlueButton Moodle plugin. For anybody interested in this service, I've included a link to the registration portal. Next is completion extension using subplugins. I'll go into more detail about what a subplugin is, but for now, suffice to say that the intention of this change in the core plugin is to allow for more options when it comes to the criteria used to assess if a student has completed a BigBlueButton activity. In the future, we want to add these options without interfering with the core plugin. Excuse me. And sub-plugins will help us to do that by extending what already exists. Here is a more visual representation of what we've started the groundwork for. These are the settings of a BigBlueButton activity. In the core plugin, and by core plugin, that is to say BigBlueButton as it currently is within Moodle, has options to use meeting participation for activity completion. So the one outlined in red here, however, is not present in the core plugin, but we are working on and we have designed a way to add more options without making this change in the core plugin itself. So plans for the future. So the general idea is that we want to provide more flexibility in plugin configuration. So what this means is that we want to fit more specific needs, such as meeting customization, passing more data from Moodle into sessions, and vice versa. We also want to build on the current functionality without making major changes to the core plugin itself. We also want to pave a path for integration in the future, which means we want to be able to update the plugin to keep up with changes in BigBlueButton itself. For example, any changes to the API, which the Moodle plugin uses, and any new features that BigBlueButton introduces, we want to be able to make use of them in the Moodle plugin. We also would like to have a faster response to the needs for features and improvements. Having said all of this, we have many plans, and how we intend to work on them is through the use of sub-plugins. So the S here was that we added this, and it illustrates almost the fact that it's a bit of a super solution for us, because it's swooping in, and because of how versatile it is, it's helping us to work towards fulfilling our goals. So the question is, what are subplugins? So subplugins are extensions that can extend the BigBlueButton Moodle plugin without modifying the core. The benefit of this is to reduce the effort to enhance BigBlueButton's integration, and enhancements will not be tied to Moodle or BigBlueButton or the BigBlueButton Moodle plugin release cycle, and it will allow companies and developers to make improvements to current functionality. So the concept of subplugins isn't actually foreign in Moodle. In fact, the activities listed here support extensions of their core functionality by installing additional plugins. So for instance, activities like quizzes, assignments, and forums, those can be enhanced with plugins that add new question types, submission formats, or grading methods. In the case of BigBlueButton, here are some examples of what subplugins could do. So you want to give educators access to additional settings and more options in activity completion customization. So for example, an instructor might want to know which students are at risk in a particular course. So the Moodle data would be passed into BigBlueButton to highlight, let's say, the data related to a student, for example, missed assignments. So an instructor would be able to see from within BigBlueButton data passed from Moodle and be aware of which students have missed particular assignments. We also, educators will also be able to fine tune activity completion criteria. So if they want to have more than just a check for if a student has participated in a chat, they might want them to participate a little bit more than that. Then they would have, for example, this criteria of having participated in a chat at least twice. They'd also be able to enable waiting room for enrolled users, and students could be awarded achievements in a BigBlueButton meeting, and that data could be passed back into Moodle. And another use case would be to give site administrators the ability to customize the BigBlueButton plugin for everyone on the site. So that could include branding for every BigBlueButton session by passing the Moodle site logos into BigBlueButton, or passing default webcam background images into BigBlueButton as well. We also have a demonstration here to show what we have been working on. The actual implementation may end up being different, but the idea would be the same: to pass custom data from Moodle when a meeting is created or joined to a BigBlueButton session. So what we're going to do first is going to install the sub-plugin. So Moodle treats a sub-plugin the same way it would the installation of a plugin. It will go through the exact same process. So Moodle is just upgrading, taking in the sub-plugin. And here the sub-plugin is displaying the available information that it can pass from Moodle to BigBlueButton. So the site administrator can choose what data from Moodle they would like to be able to pass. They can also opt to not select any options, and it would be possible to pass completely custom data to BigBlueButton. So as you can see, the sub-plugin settings are found as a BigBlueButton plugin category. So from here, you can actually manage the sub-plugin. For example, disabling it, uninstalling it, or configuring settings. And this management will be available for each individual sub-plugin installed. So here you can see the individual settings for this sub-plugin. So now I'm going to go into our BigBlueButton activity instance. Going to go into settings. And now the sub plugin has added an extra category. And this is where you would be able to enter in the data that you would like to pass from Moodle into BigBlueButton. So I'm going to add a new parameter here. So that activity info.icon URL, that's just the information that that Moodle would be able to pass as data into BigBlueButton. If you recall all of the settings that I enabled before, this is just the data that can be passed from those particular categories. I'm going to choose to pass the activity name. And when passing that information, I'm just going to give it a label. And that label will be associated with the data that Moodle is passing into BigBlueButton. Here it's Moodle activity. So I expect Moodle activity to have this information. And then we can choose when we want to pass this data, whether when a session is created, joined, or both. And then we're going to pass another parameter, and this is going to be completely custom data. So I don't want Moodle to pass any of the data that I already enabled it to send. I'm going to create a whole new piece of information. So that's test param 123. So now I've created and I've joined the session. So now that we have set the data now that we've sent the data that we wanted to pass, we can determine whether it was successfully sent to BigBlueButton using a tool called API Mate. I'm just checking if the meeting is running from there. It will help us to get information about the meeting we have just created. So here we're going to retrieve the meeting information, which will actually tell us if the data we sent was passed to BigBlueButton and interpreted correctly. So I'm just going to highlight the information that has been passed. Moodle activity correctly has passed the activity name. And then new param, which is the custom information that I sent to BigBlueButton, has also been passed correctly. So this is a proof of concept tool for developers, and we are going to build upon it in the future. But this is just helping us to prototype the new capabilities with the Moodle integration. So to wrap up, we've made a lot of progress, but there's still some work to be done for Moodle 4.5 and beyond that we will be looking into. So for example, additional hooks in the core BigBlueButton plugin. So in the future, we'd like to be able to have sub-plugins override what the core plugin is passing into a BigBlueButton meeting. An example of this could be lock settings, where the BigBlueButton core plugin might be passing data about the lock settings. We would want a sub-plugin to be able to override that. And another instance of that would be to override the user interface. So in the recordings display, we might want a sub-plugin to be able to make changes to the recording table and the data within the recording table. So we would need to implement a hook to do that. And finally, gradebook and activity completion. We'd also like to investigate and see if it's possible to put a score in the gradebook based on participation and activity. Thank you for your time and attention. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes, very exciting. So by sub-plugin handling localization, can you explain a bit of a use case for that, for its text strings? That can be something that we investigate and we look further into. I'm not sure if it can, but I would have to look into that. So yes, the response to that, strings that appear in the plugin can be localized directly through language strings.
Right then, I see Brian typing. Yeah, there is another question right there.
Will there be any sample plugins available when this becomes available, even if just to inspect? Yes, so in the future, we do have plans to provide sample plugins just for testing and for people to be able to see how exactly they could implement sub plugins.
Question. Actually, Brian, I can add here something. One of the things what we're looking into is to have these sub plugins admitted and accepted as a type in the Moodle plugin database. Contribute those sub plugins in there. Not it's not a reality yet, but it's something we have been discussing internally how to bring to you people. All right, if there are no more questions, we can wrap it up here and stop the recording. And thank you, Shamiso.
Thanks, Jesus, and thanks everybody for joining in.
Thank you, everybody, for